We're going to move on now to the next item of business, which is a debate on motion 23536 in the name of Richard Leonard on business support. I would encourage all members who wish to contribute to press their request to speak buttons, and I call on Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We are regularly told by the First Minister that the best way to support jobs and support businesses is to control the virus, that there is a direct correlation between public health and the public economy. And there is. We know this all too well, that keeping the virus down will keep the economy open. The high transmission rate we still see, the tragedy of the high death rate we have witnessed, the failure to test, which is perhaps the government's biggest mistake, the failure to isolate and quarantine, these basic principles of public health and infectious disease control were ignored, and so the First Minister is right. This does correspond with a high rate of business closures and a deeper crisis of economic failure, and with a higher level of job losses than was inevitable. That is what the government has presided over. We are facing a 10% crash in output. We are expecting unemployment to double, and our town and city centres are being hollowed out. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not attributing the situation facing small businesses and retail jobs entirely to the pandemic. We cannot lose sight of the fact that we have heard warnings for years that our high streets and our town centres are at risk. According to the Federation of Small Businesses, in their Transforming Towns report, 1 in 10 town centre properties has been vacant across Scotland since 2014. But in the week that we are seeing 25,000 jobs at risk across the UK in big retailers like the Arcadia Group and Debenhams, when giants like that are crashing, and we know that in high streets and town centres across the country, small independent businesses are also facing the threat of closure, it is time for action. Small Business Saturday is this weekend, but it will have a hollow ring this year because those small businesses in Tier 4 areas in Scotland, serving over 40% of the Scottish population, are not open for business. In fact, too many of them are boarded up. The Scottish Retail Consortium has estimated that non-food shops will miss out on £270 million, over £250 million in lost revenue, over the 3 weeks of restrictions across the 11 local authorities currently in Tier 4, which is why we say that the Scottish Government's Strategic Framework Business Fund does not go far enough. For some, it offers only a fraction of the losses. For others, it does not reach them at all, which is why we do not support the SNP amendment, which removes the call in our motion for more business support. Yes, I'll take an intervention.
Gillian Martin.
Very grateful to Richard Leonard for taking the intervention. If it were up to him, if he was in charge of Scotland, where would he get additional funding from?
Richard Leonard.
Well, I'll come to that in a minute, because if Gillian Martin reads our motion, you will see that there's £2.2 billion of unallocated resources from Barnett consequentials, which the government could spend. And of course, it's right that the government, it's right that public health is protected. Of course it's right that lives are put before commerce, but it also means that there must be proportionate mitigation for business as well. So when the £30 million discretionary fund was announced 2 weeks ago by the First Minister, it was to assist those businesses which fell through the gaps of existing support schemes, like freelancers, businesses without premises like taxi drivers, people who had recently taken the plunge to start up a new business, businesses in supply chains. And I have to report that I've been contacted by taxi drivers and by other businesses hanging by a thread who have been scouring local authority websites for information on how they can get help. But they are being told they are waiting for Scottish Government guidance. And because there is no guidance, applications for this funding are not yet open. And because there is no confirmation date in sight, there is no support available. and so still they wait. And what about the £2.2 billion of unallocated Barnett consequentials? What about all those small businesses now in dire straits who need action now? What about all those working women and men whose jobs are at risk now? The government must outline to this Parliament and to the people how this will be allocated to save businesses and to save jobs. But we do want the Scottish Government to consider the long term too, and in so doing work with businesses and with trade unions. We all know that we cannot go back to austerity, to a deep and long recession, to crisis and contraction, to business as usual. We cannot go back to an economy run in the interests of the powerful and the most wealthy. That instead of small businesses, the middle class, the working people of this country falling further behind, they should get a decent standard of living and a better share of the wealth that they create. We need a vision of an economy which serves the people rather than people simply serving the economy, where there is a rebalance of power between big business and small business, between landlord and tenant, between men and women, between hirer and worker, so that we give people meaningful work and decent pay, so that we don't have more division, more polarisation, where instead the politics of hope take over from the economics of despair, where we have a government that listens to the people's priorities, that answers to businesses in need, that understands the importance of jobs and community, that hears loud and clear the voice of working people and their trade unions, a government that is prepared to act for the common good. I move the motion in my name.
Thank you very much. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary, Kate Forbes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Every day, I, like many others around the Chamber, speak to businesses about the devastating impact of the public health crisis on their trade, their operations and their income. Much of the fragile optimism of the summer months as we eased out of lockdown turned to pessimism and despair as the virus resurged and additional measures were necessary to suppress the virus. And all of us have stories and examples of grief, loss and worry. But business owners, employers and employees in so many sectors have had the additional trauma and despair of staying afloat in impossible circumstances. And, Presiding Officer, I want to say at the outset that I know that business support in the form of grants, non-domestic rates relief or advice and guidance does not replace all of the lost income and does not compensate for an open, thriving economy. And that is why, through the strategic framework, we've sought to move away from the blanket approach to keep as many businesses and as much of the economy open as possible, and why our objective is to get the economy trading as fully as possible by suppressing the virus. As Richard Leonard rightly said, the health crisis and the economic crisis are interdependent. Managing the virus effectively enables the economy to stay open and businesses to trade, and in turn, protecting the strengths of our wider economy will have long-term health benefits, because ultimately a strong, trading, fair economy and business base protects and creates jobs, tackles poverty and reduces wider health harms. Today's announcement on the vaccine is a light at the end of the tunnel. The government is ready to deploy it quickly and safely. I know that businesses in many cases are operating with hugely reduced trade, that reserves are almost depleted and they've exhausted business support, but there is hope. And, Presiding Officer, I've also got hope in the way that businesses large and small have been so public-spirited. And in that vein, I want to commend and thank Tesco for voluntarily choosing to refund the public finances for the support they received through rates relief. Tesco has taken that decision in recognition of how resilient they've been through the crisis. And I know that won't be possible for every business, but for those who have been similarly resilient, I'd encourage them to follow Tesco's lead. And we're looking at a means by which other supermarkets, or indeed any other businesses, can follow suit. I can confirm that every penny returned to us will be invested in Scotland's recovery from COVID, will be used to support those who have been hardest hit as part of the pandemic. With only a tight 4 minutes, I'll take as many interventions as you want in my closing comments, but I'd like to set out the government's position now. Presiding Officer, at the beginning of the pandemic, we deployed every penny of business support as quickly as possible. We invested £2.3 billion to support business and recovery. There was over £48 million to help businesses affected by restrictions in October, £972 million for non-domestic rates relief. The Small Business and Retail, Hospitality and Leisure grant funds were worth £1 billion and over £185 million of additional funding for the Pivotal Resilience Scheme to support key anchor businesses and the Hardship Fund for businesses that didn't have non-domestic rates. There was also a package of sectoral support, for example, on seafood and fisheries. But since November, that support has changed. Our strategic framework is complemented by the Business Fund, administered by local authorities, providing set grants of up to £3,000 every 4 weeks to eligible businesses, closed or directly impacted by restrictions. Grant support is in place as tier levels are reviewed and applied locally. Presiding Officer, one of the difficulties of not having access to HMRC or indeed a nationwide business tax is that support for businesses falling through the cracks has to be deployed on a sector-by-sector basis, and we will continue to announce funding for businesses that have fallen through the cracks. And to that end, last month we announced another £45 million to support business, of which £30 million was local authority discretionary fund and £15 million for the newly self-employed scheme. Presiding Officer, I often hear it said that we should copy English schemes. If we'd copied the UK Government's approach, there would have been no hardship fund, no pivotal resilience fund, no newly self-employed fund. There would have been less generous recurring grants for businesses caught in the tiers and levels, with the smallest businesses receiving less in England, and those out with Tier 2 that don't have to close by law receiving substantially less, if anything at all. Presiding Officer, as I close, I am in no doubt about the trials faced by businesses right now, in my constituency and across the country. We have used every penny at our disposal to provide support, and we will continue to do so where we can. The reference to £2.2 billion in the Labour motion is frankly ridiculous, as anybody with a calculator would know. And I could assure you that all funding available to us is being and will continue to be used to support business. I don't think Richard Leonard understands what budget revisions are. Above and beyond business support, through this strategic framework, we want to give businesses across Scotland as much certainty as possible. It is that certainty which is just as important as financial support, and we will take all the necessary steps to reduce the risk of transmission and ultimately to save lives. To do all that, we will work with businesses. We will listen to them, we will understand their needs, we will understand their concerns and their views, and we will ensure that the support that we can resource is in place for those businesses.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Just to reiterate, to remind all members, we will have a short time for speeches. 4-minute speeches, please, only. Maurice Gulleton.
Thank you. Yes, we all want to get into bed nice and early tonight, Presiding Officer, so we should keep to time. And I move the amendment in my name. The level of the UK Government intervention in response to the pandemic has been without parallel. A furlough scheme that has helped save 1 million Scottish jobs and a Barnett formula consequentials that have delivered an additional £8.2 billion of funding for Scotland. Unfortunately for all of us, the SNP have not been forthcoming with this money. They are currently sitting on £2.2 billion of unallocated funding. This is coming from an SNP government that time and time again have been told by business leaders and sector bodies that they aren't listening to the needs of business in response to this pandemic, that time and time again have been told that their interventions have taken too long to get to those businesses in need, and that time and time again have been told that their support measures don't go far enough. The time for the SNP in action has to end. It will already be too late for a number of Scottish businesses, but others can still be saved. Now is the time to act, and with the hope of a vaccination rollout programme beginning any week now, we are starting to see a pathway out of this enduring nightmare. But Scotland's small businesses need to get through the pandemic to ensure that Scotland has any sort of economy left at the other side. We learned today that Tesco are to repay £585 million of COVID-19 business rates relief, and this means around £50 million going to the Scottish Government, which we would urge to go to independent retailers via grant payments. This is a small sum when you consider the SNP are hoarding billions in cash that could be spent right now. The question is, why? Why are they putting the livelihoods of millions of Scots at risk when they have the means to do something about it? What other priority could they have for this money? But we know what their priority is, the one thing that trumps all others, their obsession with independence. It's independence and independence at all costs. We heard again this week that the First Minister may push for an independence referendum next year. They're sitting on this cash as they see it as a war chest in the run-up to the election and the furtherance of their independence goals. If this is wrong, then prove me wrong. Publish a plan. Happy to take an intervention.
Kate Forbes.
The member has Conservatives that sit on the Finance Committee that scrutinises the budget revisions that have been made twice and will be made again in February. He knows precisely where the money is going. He also knows that since the last budget revision, there have been additional announcements, which if he gets his calculator out and counts up, he'll see where the money is going.
Maurice Golden.
The Fraser of Allender Institute has been clear that there's over £1 billion unallocated. Spice has said 2.2 billion have been unallocated, and businesses are desperate right now, Cabinet Secretary, and we absolutely have to get that money to them in order to ensure that they survive. So I'm asking the Cabinet Secretary to publish a plan for spending the money, and not next year but now. Show how you will use it to protect jobs and save livelihoods. Publish a plan, give confidence to small businesses that they can make it through the winter and they will be able to survive until the green shoots of spring arrive. Publish a plan and show Scotland that there is something that is more important to the SNP than independence. Presiding Officer, in the SNP's amendment, they say they will provide an update on the allocation of consequentials to date. Scotland's small businesses don't need an update on allocations to date. They need the Scottish Government to spend the billions in unallocated funding that they have been hoarding. The livelihoods of millions of Scots are depending on it. Presiding Officer, we will be supporting the Labour motion this afternoon.
Thank you. And I call Patrick Harvey, who joins us remotely.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to debate this issue, and the Labour motion does acknowledge the critically important role of small businesses, not only to our economy, but also to our communities and our society. It makes particular reference to the hospitality sector, and it recognises the risks that these businesses face, and the need for government, businesses and unions to work together to develop a long-term recovery plan. But I am concerned at the way the issue of unallocated resources is presented. I think we're all able to acknowledge that this money is not sitting idle, as some would misrepresent it. Certainly not, as we've just heard, a suggestion that billions of pounds are being set aside for a secret plan for independence. I don't think we should lean into that kind of nonsense. It's clear that no Cabinet Secretary, regardless of which party was in government right now, would be able to formally allocate all of this to specific budget lines at the moment, given the continued uncertainty. I think the government does have to address certain important issues in relation to consequentials. The government amendment corrects the unhelpful implication. It's a bit too self-congratulatory, isn't unusual for a government amendment, but it does acknowledge fairly the necessary actions being taken by the UK government. But the Cabinet Secretary just 2 weeks ago told the Finance and Constitution Committee that there were general areas that this so far unallocated resource would be earmarked for. She listed maintaining transport networks, education, and payment for people who are self-isolating. Now, the recent announcement of the £500 payment to health and social care staff, a policy which I welcome, was not in that list. And that will therefore leave less available from the unallocated resource for the priorities which were identified in evidence to the committee just a fortnight ago. So the Cabinet Secretary does have a responsibility to come forward with clear information on this point as soon as possible. There are some other issues which I feel are missing from the Labour motion, issues which I sought to raise in my amendment, which has not been selected for debate. Business support must benefit the workforce, not just business owners. And I'm sure that Richard Leonard would agree with that principle. Hospitality is one of the sectors we're all concerned about, but it's one with a long-standing pattern of widespread poverty pay and exploitative employment practices long before the pandemic. It also has a very low level of unionisation. No surprise there, because low standards and lack of unionisation often go hand in hand. So I think we should all welcome the more than 11% increase in Unite Hospitality membership during the pandemic, as many, many more people are seeing that the market will never protect their interests. Government has failed to do the same, and so collective action can make the difference that they need to see in their lives. And there are great examples of success in that collective action being taken around the country, with some hospitality employers being forced into reversing damaging decisions. There is also far more that is yet to be done, like challenging the lack of any minimum income floor in the furlough scheme. Minimum wages in this country are too low already, with even the highest bands well below the living wage. And discrimination against younger workers is an accepted norm which the UK government has deliberately exacerbated. So in closing, Presiding Officer, the job retention scheme is now expecting people to live on far less than their normal poverty wages. So a minimum income floor would give some desperately needed protection to those workers. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. And I call Willie Rennie to open for the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've worked closely with Kate Forbes on the financial support for individuals and businesses. I have to say she's very good at listening and responding. In fact, she listened so carefully to Richard Leonard and myself when we proposed a bonus for health and social care workers that she found the money for it. So I hope that listening carries on today as well. Because we know that when she says she has no money left, what she means is she can find £180 million when the First Minister needs to make a speech to conference. So I'm sure she'll forgive us when we're a little bit sceptical when she pleads poverty once again. I'm pleased the Government has responded to the concerns about the effectiveness of the self-isolation payments. I hope that the changes will result in a higher success rate than 24%. I also hope that those who require to self-isolate in advance of a hospital appointment can claim from the fund in future as well. The Minister needs to work to simplify the business grant application process. I think it's become over-complex, very short timescales, but also the teams handling the claims are very short-staffed as well. And I know councils are in large part responsible for that, but I hope she works with local authorities to make those improvements. But my main requests cover three areas today. Firstly is quite a niche area. I might think of travel agents, both outward and inward bound. They include golf tourism, which is very important to my constituency. It attracts customers from the USA and all across the globe to play on the world's best golf courses. They also include travel agents who send local people to far-flung parts of the world. Almost all their business went overnight in March, but these companies weren't able to furlough their staff because those staff had to dedicate their time to getting the customers' money back from all the holidays that had been cancelled. So they have been running on empty for months. And despite getting some business rate grants earlier on this year, many of them don't actually have shops or offices, they've been losing money every single day whilst paying their staff. Now, I know there's been discussions between ministers and the sector, but I hope the Minister might be able to update us later on in our summing up. Secondly, is probably another niche area, is taxi drivers, which I know is something that Richard Leonard has also raised as well. And the new council discretionary fund is only available in level 4 areas. In level 3 areas, their work is significantly affected by the restrictions, so they are struggling to keep afloat. Certainly, yeah. Kate Forbes.
Just to make the point that the discretionary funding is available to all local authorities, not just those in level 4.
Well, that is excellent news. I'm glad that's changed as a result of my contribution this afternoon. I'll take all the credit for that. But it's good news that that happens. But I hope the taxi firms do get the support that they require, because they are really struggling. And I hope we get similar movement on the next point that I'm going to raise. And this is probably the most substantial one, which is tourism businesses that are affected by the restrictions within a council area, but also the travel restrictions between them. B&Bs, guest houses and self-catering businesses in level 3 areas cannot accept bookings for anyone outside their council area, and they are also restricted by the indoor visiting rule within their council area. Yet they're not entitled to access the hardship or the business closure funds. So take Hawkswood in my constituency. It's a self-catering properties take up to 10 people. They're not going to find many families that can fill a property with 10 people. But they're in a level 3 area, they can't get support, they can't get financial support, but so therefore they are struggling. And I hope we get some movement from the government in that area as well, so that, because they're affected in multiple ways by multiple restrictions, but the government is not there to support them when they need it. So I hope the Minister will be able to sum up in those quite important areas for my constituency and many others in their final contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on Polly McNeill to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
If you think you understand the scale of the jobs crisis, then I think you need to multiply that significantly. We are just beginning to witness the beginning of the jobs collapse that we've seen only yesterday of Arcadia Group, Debenhams, really sad, flowing from the pandemic, but also the decisions that government have made about lockdown restrictions. I think listening to Kate Forbes earlier, I didn't really hear Kate Forbes at least acknowledge that for many it will simply kill their businesses. And many of those businesses will simply not be there after these restrictions. And as Richard Leonard said, the support available for some of these businesses is totally inadequate. And if it was adequate, they would have had a chance of survival. We've locked down retail and hospitality at a time in the year where their sales would have seen them through January. Meanwhile, online competitors are largely unaffected. There needs to be an understanding that because of these restrictions, thousands of businesses will lose out and thousands of jobs will be lost. So we need a jobs programme like no other. We need state intervention on a scale that we've never seen before. And we need worker protections and support for businesses like we've never seen before. We need conditionality on a living wage on all public sector jobs related to the public sector, but we also need to seek to try and protect those in the private sector who don't have the protection of a trade union. There are deep inequalities in who was supported through the pandemic in the job retention scheme. And many young people in the hospitality sector who were dismissed without any protections, not in a union, no security for their future. And many were not furloughed. And there are tens of thousands of self-employed workers who didn't qualify. There are far too many gaps, and there needs to be some understanding that many people were left with absolutely nothing. I'd like to know what audit is being done on the fallout for this, and if the government actually can tell us if they think their plans are the right ones. We need an end to 0 hours contract, but we also need a proper policy to end evictions so that those people that are struggling with their jobs can actually have a home and some security until they can get back on their feet. I want to talk about the Youth Guarantee Scheme. Every young person is apparently being offered an opportunity in education, jobs or training. I don't really understand why the government are simply saying that we'll help 10,000 young people over the age of 25. It is not ambitious enough, and that tells me that the government don't understand the scale of the problem. Now, I welcome the new directorate that has been set up to run the scheme, but can we have a detailed report that this is not just government speak, agencies, money? We need to see that this is actually having some impact on the ground. I don't know any young person in my family or in my community that has been contacted, that knows what website to contact. I don't know anybody, and we are 9 months down the line, who knows what to do if they don't have a job. I'm sorry, this is not good enough. It is absolutely not good enough. Well, I will in a second. Further education colleges. I mean, I have not had any contact with maybe one exception. I don't know what they're doing. Without further education involved in this, we cannot offer young people this guarantee that you've said of skills and training. It's not joining up, Minister, and I will take an intervention from the Cabinet.
Ms McNeill only has 4 minutes. Cabinet Secretary.
And it is a debate on business support, but can I say to the member, there is the website. It was launched here in this chamber on the 5th of November, and not just me, but every single member in this Parliament should be promoting that website.
Polly McNeill.
I didn't mean to shout over you, but that's my point. You know, the website it's not good enough. My own city of Glasgow, we are worried about. There's no recognition that we don't have an aviation plan. We don't have a plan for the music sector returning, a job creation scheme, intervention to support jobs. We need government ministers to start taking on this massive challenge. And so far as I'm concerned, it's been mostly talk.
Stuart McMillan to be followed by Jamie Halker-Johnson.
Thank you very much, President Officer. President Officer, this debate today is very important, and it did provide the Scottish Government with an opportunity to highlight some of the support packages that they have introduced this year. But clearly, there is still more to do, and I don't think anybody in this chamber could say that there isn't. There is still more to do. But I do welcome all the support that has been introduced so far by both governments. This was a point I highlighted a few weeks ago during a similar debate. Now, I'm not going to be churlish and ignore the finance that has come from the UK Government. It's important to recognise, however, that it's not come from the Treasury savings account, but it's in fact came on the Treasury credit card. But it was the right thing to do. I touched upon the furlough scheme the last time, and generally that has been of huge assistance. But as we all know, there have been 8 different versions of the furlough scheme announced by the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, 3 of which have not been implemented. And although the extension until March 2021 will actually help to prevent job losses, it has come too late for many businesses and workers in all of our constituencies and regions. Now, some businesses have already taken the difficult decision to make people redundant because of the unnecessary confusion caused by the UK Government and the expectation that the furlough scheme would be withdrawn. Now, some of these jobs and businesses may have been saved if the UK Government stopped the London knows best approach and listened to others for once. And it took 6 months of pressure from the Scottish Government and others to eventually get the Chancellor to do a U-turn on the furlough. To the Chancellor and to the Scottish Tories, I say it's clear many businesses didn't have 6 months to waste. No one can deny that 2020 has been an unprecedented year with COVID-19, and also in just under 4 weeks' time, we're going to crash out of the EU, the most successful trading bloc, against our will. And as things stand, no deal has yet been reached, which adds even more uncertainty to the chaotic picture we have been witnessing for months. Now, business talks about certainty, and the pro-union side spoke all about it during the 2014 independence referendum. There is certainly no certainty now. No certainty about leaving the EU, no certainty about business success post-COVID-19, unless it's the supermarkets. And I do welcome, I've been critical of Tesco in the past, but I do welcome Tesco's announcement today, and I would like the other supermarkets to do the same thing. And there's been no certainty from a London elite who care little for other parts of the 4 nations and act when decisions affect the south. Now, the northwest of England can tell that story also. Presiding Officer, with the limited financial powers of this Parliament, I've seen how this Scottish Government actually can assist businesses in my constituency. When Texas Instruments announced that they were going to close the Greenock plant, making nearly 300 people redundant, after many months and a huge effort by many, many people, this Scottish Government investment of £13.7 million as part of a £47 million package total investment saved those jobs. And those jobs remain and are helping the small business sector in my community. And also when Ferguson's in Port Glasgow was about to go under, this Scottish Government used its powers to save the yard and the 300 jobs in it. More jobs have been created, including apprenticeships. Now, those jobs are helping the economy in my community. Presiding Officer, with the full financial powers of independence, more business support which has been requested or demanded can be delivered, obviously undertaken in partnership with the business community. Acting swiftly, as compared to the dithering delay we have seen from the UK Government regarding the furlough scheme, would certainly help. And also more certainty can be provided to the economy. A Scottish Government can be responsive and not need to wait for the Barnett consequentials to do things. Scotland can cut out the sophistry of the UK and get on with the job of governing for the business community and also for the people of Scotland with independence.
Thank you. I call Jamie Halker-Johnson to be followed by Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We've heard today from around the Chamber about some of the challenges facing small businesses, and I welcome the opportunity to reflect on these today, particularly those in my region. As a Highlands and Islands MSP, I'm keenly aware of both the opportunities and the challenges that small businesses face. When compared with other parts of Scotland, we seem particularly entrepreneurial. Small employers are considerably overrepresented. They're the backbone of our regional economy. But much of this comes from necessity. It's not about national businesses or global chains reaching into these communities. It's about small businesses that are part of communities, growing organically and working to create jobs and build livelihoods. Seasonal employment around the tourist season also remains significant in some parts of the region, offsetting losses from other times of the year and stretching out the impact of an often restricted tourist season. So it's especially hard to see once viable enterprises go to the wall or under threat of doing so as a result of a virus that has been unprecedented in its impact on all of our lives. Across Scotland, there have been hundreds of desperate decisions made in offices, shops, pubs, and over kitchen tables, as business owners question whether they can continue or whether the pressure of their finances have become overwhelming. And for too many, those decisions have already been made. Unfortunately, the limited data we have on the impact of this pandemic on rural Scotland will only show us what has happened after a significant delay. But we can see from around the Highlands and Islands the number of businesses that have shut up shop or have never reopened after the first lockdown, businesses unable to make the sums add up. We know that delays in getting support to these businesses can be the difference between them carrying on or failing. And we also know that in smaller communities, just how codependent these businesses can be. A local hotel can be the linchpin for a whole range of local suppliers. An events business shut down by restrictions may have been the driver of demand in the nearby hospitality sector. Too often in the equations cooked up in St Andrew's House, this simple principle seems to have been forgotten. As the Federation of Small Businesses has made clear, thousands of businesses which supply our retail and hospitality sectors are facing similar levels of hardship as those that have been hit directly. A message we have heard continually from many sectors: support has only come when it was fought for. Equally, when one sector was granted a package of support, others were often left out or simply treated as an afterthought. And in the Highlands and Islands, many of our small businesses are facing a hard winter. That's not to say the support available has not been welcome, but in many cases there are real worries that, to quote Scottish Hospitality, grants and other help simply isn't going to touch the sides of the losses they have suffered. The main glint of light has been the furlough scheme, which has helped businesses large and small across the UK keep staff on and protected the best part of 1 million jobs here in Scotland. And of course, 8.2 billion has come to Scotland to deal with this pandemic this year alone as a result of UK government decisions, an unprecedented figure. But as the Fraser Allender Institute has highlighted, the Scottish Government has held back key sums, failing to get them in a timely way to the businesses that need them. Presiding Officer, we're now in the 10th month of COVID restrictions of varying levels of severity. And this has been a long slog for many businesses and employees, with a reactive Scottish Government that has too often taken too long to step up and act. What we need to see now is an approach from the Scottish Government that looks beyond the next month, that avoids disproportionate impacts on small businesses or on certain regions within our country. A vision that considers how we emerge, how we recover, and how we rebuild after the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Halker-Johnson. I call on Gillian Martin to be followed by Daniel Johnson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. This is the time of year where we normally would be talking about small businesses in their respective constituencies, urging people to buy local, support our independent shops and cherish the diversity of offer on our high streets. In Aberdeenshire, thankfully, those shops are still open, and these small businesses need our support more than ever. And I make this plea to any of my constituents watching: please get your Christmas presents, where possible, from the high streets of our market towns of Turriff, Inverurie, Ellon and Old Meldrum. Support the struggling self-employed micro-businesses who have no Christmas fairs this year. Find your favourite local makers online where they continue to sell. Buy your Christmas trees, wreaths and flowers from our local florists and garden centres direct. Get your turkeys from our farm shops. This year of all years, it's more important than ever. In Scotland, in contrast to other countries, the government have had to make business support and public health decisions against the backdrop of other decisions made in impactful areas which we don't control. And for the purpose of this debate, the most obvious one is the fiscal arrangement we have as a devolved nation. The money we have is the money we have, and we cannot borrow any more. Still, within those constraints, the Scottish Government have been able to deliver over £2.38 billion worth of support, which has gone to a wider range of businesses than our other UK counterparts, affected supply chains of those that have had to temporarily cease trading, grant support addressing the issues of the newly self-employed person faces when the UK Government has frankly ignored them, given discretion and flexibility to councils to decide who is eligible. I and my constituency office team have throughout this time challenged quite a few decisions for local businesses that have been made by the local authority and been able to get them support where that flexibility has been a little bit wanting. Is what we're doing enough? No, of course it isn't. The full green recovery is going to take so much more. Enough might be borrowing 4% of our GDP like Germany has done, front-loading that recovery. That's what this part of the chamber would like. And it would be immensely helpful if every MSP could get behind the Scottish Government in those calls for borrowing powers and more fiscal flexibility. Well, I'm an optimist, what can I say? Personally, I would also like to see a renewed focus on any remaining COVID business disruption support being on the very small businesses that have fallen between cracks in eligibility. The hardest hit people from the creative industries, for example, the beauty and lifestyle businesses, travel, tourism and events. And a high proportion of these, incidentally, are women-led businesses. Many are sole traders operating out of their homes, who we know have not had the benefit of furlough or support delivered through the rates system. I also have a plea for more help for those who have graduated from our colleges and universities this year. They don't need more training, they need opportunities. Many of those graduates were hoping to start their own freelance careers in sectors where salaried secure jobs don't exist and haven't for some time, like the creative industries, and I think that they need specific assistance. In closing, Presiding Officer, I too welcome that Tesco is refunding the support given to them by the Scottish Government at the start of the pandemic. The Cabinet Secretary's immediate commitment to give that £60 million to those businesses and communities who've been hardest hit during Scotland's recovery from COVID is absolutely the right one. I hope that other large businesses who are now finding their feet will join Tesco in giving back so that we can do what we can to redeploy those funds to the small businesses who are finding it that much harder. Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. And I call Daniel Johnson to be followed by John McAlpine.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I listened to the Cabinet Secretary open her comments for this debate with an increasing sense of despair. Because in essence what she was saying was that the assistance that was in place, that despite the increasing evidence that we are facing an absolute catastrophic situation in terms of jobs, there would be no more new money, no new schemes. And what she was offering, if you just let me continue the point, is a sympathetic ear and hope for the new year. But as Pauline McNeill pointed out, businesses simply will not be here, and hope will simply be insufficient. And if I can just say this before I take the intervention, I thank goodness I am not a retailer anymore, because if I was, right now I'd be sitting on thousands of pounds worth of stock that I would have had to commit to back in August and September with no possibility of selling that, and it would leave me ruined. Now, if she can explain to me what she says to retailers in similar situations, especially in level 4 areas, I'd be interested in her answer.
Cabinet Secretary.
My answer would be twofold. The first is, and I said it in my speech, that we will continue to make every penny we have available to retailers and others who need it most, that there will be more announcements of business support. The second point I would make, though, is that the fastest way to support businesses is to get the economy back open and trading, because any form of business support is just a sticking plaster and does not compensate for lost income.
Daniel Johnson.
Quite simply, Spice say that that's not correct. The Fraser Islander says that they have not spent every penny that they have available to them. And in terms of controlling the virus, I'm afraid confidence is gone. Other countries have managed to keep these sections of business and the economy open through testing, through tracing, and this government has simply failed. And the consequences are going to be lost businesses and lost jobs. Now, my constituency is one that I'm very proud to say has a richness of independent retail and independent hospitality. And I have to say, it's with a sense of, I think, incredulity that those businesses hear that they are non-essential. This is a city that thrives on tourism. It's a city that thrives on its diversity of independent businesses. These businesses are not non-essential. They're absolutely critical to the functioning of this city's economy. And quite frankly, right now, at level 3, hospitality is completely shut down. For areas in level 4, they are completely shut down. And those businesses feel that the government's responses to date have been crude, without detail and without rationale. Now, recently, as many other members will have, I've been having extensive Zoom calls with groups of businesses in my constituency. And in particular, hospitality businesses. They have been doing a lot of work. We've been in discussion with businesses that represent 450 premises across the city, and they are clear. They have already lost 5,000 jobs from their businesses alone in the city, and 3,000 more jobs will go if the current restrictions stay in place. And they're also clear that the assistance that's been provided to date is completely insufficient. Collectively, that's been £650,000, but that's only £1,500 per business. That's it. £1,500, which doesn't even cover part of a day of trade at this time of year. It is a drop in the ocean and is completely insufficient in comparison to the hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of losses those businesses will be making. And furthermore, I still have not had a response from the First Minister, where I wrote to her setting out the very reasonable suggestions in terms of alteration of trading windows, limited alterations to the sale of alcoholic drinks, restricted seating times, and improved safety standards, all of which modest improvements could improve the ability of these businesses to continue to trade. But the realities are this, is that these would be difficult restrictions to manage at any time of year. But at this time of year, it is utterly critical because businesses, whether retail or hospitality, are utterly dependent on these weeks to make the money they need to survive through the rest of the year. And the simple reality is this, is that the economic impact is simply not being recognised. And I'll just conclude there. Quite simply, they need more than hope, they need help.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. I inadvertently called Joe McAlpine, but it's actually Rachel Hamilton to be followed by Joe McAlpine.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I refer members to my register of interest. I thank the Labour Party for bringing this debate to the Chamber today, given the unprecedented circumstances of the pandemic that we find ourselves in. The motion mentions Small Business Saturday, which in normal times is a roaring success. We on these benches are hugely supportive of businesses in Scotland, and indeed in my own constituency of Ettrick Roxburgh, Berwickshire, I normally would be out supporting them on the high street. The extent of the value of business is hard to measure because it is not just their economic output that matters, but the impact that they have on society, on combating loneliness, providing local knowledge, being advocates for the high streets and for Scotland, creating job opportunities to give people a step up on the ladder. Many businesses right now will be wondering how they will survive this winter. Losing out on normal Christmas trading has been affected by tier restrictions, particularly for those in the service sector who rely on people and they rely on the trade of physical goods and services supporting over 500,000 jobs in Scotland. It's true, there is a fine balance between managing public health and the economy, but what is not acceptable are the SNP excuses. And I'm absolutely ashamed that Kate Forbes is sitting on this money and is sitting there, standing up in an intervention saying that she will spend the money. When will you spend the money and when? And I'm not taking intervention because you can deal with it in your closing. When it comes to hospitality, senior figures in the licensed trade, law and business in Edinburgh have accused the SNP government of inconsistency in protecting the economy in cities across Scotland. This is shameful. We heard from Roddy Dunlop, QC, Dean of the Faculty of Advocates, calling out the inconsistency between Scotland's cities as unbelievable and demanding that businesses deserve an explanation. We know from FSB research that 1/5 of Scotland's small businesses and self-employed people have had no help over the course of this crisis, which many members in this chamber have highlighted this evening. This is totally unacceptable, and the buck stops with this government, the SNP. Maurice Golding highlighted the fact that they are sitting on 2.2 billion of Barnett consequentials that should be rightfully in the hands of businesses across Scotland. Businesses who are on their knees, presiding officer. The Fraser Vallender Institute revealed that the SNP are hoarding more than 1 billion at Holyrood instead of using it to protect jobs and support businesses. More than anything, this precious funding should be used wisely on grants and loans to support job retention. Job retention is crucial as we continue to weather the storm, and I thank our lucky stars that Scotland is part of a union with the might of the furlough scheme. And many people across this chamber whose constituents have benefited from the furlough scheme should be shouting from the rafters about that. No, I won't take an intervention. Presiding officer, I welcome the points raised by Labour motion in protecting jobs and the need for greater support for businesses. We will support Labour tonight, given the urgency of this situation we find ourselves in. The UK Conservative Government has stepped up to the mark for the businesses across Scotland, providing certainty to the tune of £9.5 billion, extending the schemes that protected jobs across every part of this country. Yet in Scotland, Kate Forbes, the Finance Secretary, complains ad infinitum that it isn't enough. She stashes the cash, fails to redistribute it to businesses who desperately need it. Businesses don't have votes, people have votes. Could these squirreled away pennies magically reappear in the spring to fund the list of ministerial announcements splashed over the weekend at the SNP conference? We'll soon see. They spend their time talking about a 4-day week and independence. Stuart Macmillan bangs on about independence, yet it is the Conservatives who are working to protect jobs of hard-working people and businesses across our United Kingdom. In conclusion, presiding officer, I urge members to vote for our amendment, which recognises we need a coronavirus business restrictions advisory council. I urge the SNP to take your fingers out of the ears and listen to businesses, to pay attention to them, rather than cooking up an ideological and damaging referendum.
Thank you. And this time I call Joe McAlpine before we move to closing speeches. Joe McAlpine.
Thank you very much, presiding officer. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought profound challenges both to businesses and communities across the world. Small businesses contribute enormously to our economy and provide countless jobs in our communities, but we all know they are economically vulnerable. To address these new challenges, the response must be one which is innovative, flexible and adaptive, and that is what the Scottish Government have done, including designing schemes not available in England, as the Cabinet Secretary outlined. But the fiscal powers of the Scottish Government are constrained. To quote David Phillips of the Institute of Fiscal Studies, he said as long ago as late March, as it stands, the funding arrangements for devolved governments may not be appropriate for the task in hand. This is because they have limited reserves, constrained borrowing powers, and the funding flows to them as a result of the Barnett formula, which may not reflect the challenges that they face, including powers to borrow. That sums up the problem, presiding officer. The Scottish Government is bound by law to produce a balanced budget and cannot respond quickly to emerging needs by borrowing. Scotland should not be refused the fiscal flexibility needed to prevent this health crisis from spiralling into an economic crisis, a process which I think we all agree is already well underway, sadly. I welcome the Scottish Government's commitment to spend all £8.2 billion of the COVID Barnett consequentials to support our response to COVID-19, and I welcome the Scottish Government's reprioritisation of significant sums to combat the virus. But the UK Government's 2020 spending review puts barriers in Scotland's way. It offers only limited information on the 2021-22 Scottish budget envelope, as it only covers 1 year. This makes it impossible to plan with any certainty. We experienced a similar scenario earlier this year when the UK government was not announced, and the UK government's budget was not announced until March. That delay created serious difficulties in our own budget setting and scrutiny processes. Now more than ever, the UK government must give the Scottish Government the powers needed to respond to the challenges of the pandemic. If we are going to build back better, then we need in our hands the economic tools for the job. Within those restrictions, the Government has done well in designing strategic framework business grants to help businesses which face closure or restrictions to trading. And I particularly welcome the £30 million discretionary fund to assist businesses in areas like my own, who may be in level 2, but where they are affected by restrictions elsewhere, whether it's travel or operating in both Scotland and England, which stop their customers coming or affect their supply chains. And I wanted just to say that on an operational level, I'm concerned that some local authorities don't seem to be rolling out this discretionary fund quickly enough. And I would appreciate that if the Cabinet Secretary can tell the Chamber anything with regards to her understanding of how many councils have gone live with this excellent fund provided by the Scottish Government. In conclusion, for the Scottish economy to bounce back in a way that is fair and equal, we do need to support small business. And to do that to the best of our ability, the Scottish Government needs full financial powers so that we are no longer held back by UK budgetary decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms McAlpine. And we move to closing speeches. I call Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This is a virus which has affected all of us, although for some they may have kept their health, but they've lost their livelihoods. Right now, there are more than 125,000 Scots currently looking for work, and for many, the jobs simply aren't there. It's been a devastating year for businesses, small local businesses, local employers, small shops and businesses like LAH Travel in West Kilbride in the West, which has lost its market completely. And they're not alone, because over 8,000 travel jobs in Scotland have been lost or at risk. Or the huge retailers like Arcadia and Debenhams. They employ thousands of people. They're all added to that long list of economic victims of this horrible virus. And you know things are bad when the government's own chief economist says that the jobs that we've lost over the course of this pandemic may not return until at least 2023. And I think he's been over-optimistic in that. Now, yesterday in this chamber, I took part in a debate about the mental health of young people. Youth unemployment in Scotland now sits around 14.5%. It's nearly doubled since the start of this pandemic. And that should be a huge concern to all of us. And we've had a debate today already about what happens when the government doesn't get it right. Yes, government's trying to soften the blow, but let's face it, when you legislate to shut down businesses, to ban travel, to restrict people from leaving their homes, it comes at a cost, a financial cost, a health cost, physical and mental, and an employment one too. Now look, I know we're not alone in this, we're not unique in this. Parliaments all over the world are probably having debates just like this one. But I know that speaking to businesses in my region, that the support that they get from government means so much to them. The direct effect it has on their ability to employ and stay open through these tough months. The furlough scheme, as much as it's been berated in the chamber today, the sort of direct intervention which doesn't come naturally to governments, has undoubtedly saved hundreds of thousands of jobs in Scotland. It has delivered. But no government can ill afford to permanently pay the wages of people to sit at home forever, because we have to build a resilient health and social care system. We have to properly fund public services. We need to get these businesses back open and working and paying tax and employing people. Now, the UK Chancellor promised from day one that he was prepared to do whatever it takes to support Scotland, to support every part of the UK as much as possible throughout this crisis. And I believe that he has lived up to that promise. Now, I don't often share an economic view of the world with Richard Leonard, but he is right to bring this debate to the chamber today because it is support for businesses in Scotland, or that lack of support for businesses in Scotland that so many of our businesses need, and which should cause us sleepless nights, because we shut those businesses down. They followed the rules. We often gave them just a few days' notice under the premise of the public health emergency. But it's Daniel Johnson was right to point out, we said they were non-essential. Well, they are essential. Every job is essential if you're working in that business that's being closed. And time again, there's been gaping holes in what has been offered in support, what is needed in support, and what has actually been delivered in support. It was only last month that grants for outdoor education centres, following months of warnings about an existential crisis of that industry, that they finally get some money. Let us be clear. If the Finance Secretary is sitting on Barnett consequentials, and there is debate about whether she is or she isn't, she must get that money to where it is needed. And if there is no money left in the pot, as she claims, the question is, where is it? Because every penny must be accounted for, Presiding Officer. Every penny due to Scottish businesses must go to Scottish businesses. Any money spent in the Scottish economy must go to the economy. They need that support. They need it now. They need cash in the bank. This head-in-the-sand approach to the economic crisis that we are looking at is not sustainable. I support the amendment in the name of Maurice Golden.
Thank you. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary, Kate Forbes.
Presiding Officer, I've never been in opposition, but I would have thought it's easier to secure results for constituents if they dealt in fact, and it does them no favours to pretend that the full £2.2 billion is unspent. But I do want to start with a point about transparency, because I accept that in this unprecedented of years, there is a need for additional information. It's one of the reasons we had the extra budget revision in May. And it's also one of the reasons that I offered to set out exceptionally more information to the Finance Committee in a December update, and that will be in the coming days. Of course, when it comes to business support, my commitment is to keep the Finance Committee updated as far as possible to aid their scrutiny. People that work with the budget, people that sit on the Finance Committee, will know that the UK Government's guarantee has been very helpful for planning ahead, but it does mean that there is less transparency in what generated the consequentials available, and it also does mean that funding can be given unexpectedly to the Scottish Government by the UK Government, which does allow us to go further when it comes to business support, as well as covering things like vaccines and ensuring that the transport system can continue. Now, some, not many, but some members did raise specific points, very constructive ideas about specific sectors and businesses. Gillian Martin talked about being an advocate for the businesses in her constituency, which she has been, as have other members, where they have raised specific points with me, and we have tried to resolve that and to repay the warm words that Willie Rennie bestowed upon me. He too has been very constructive in raising specific issues that sometimes can be resolved, not always, but sometimes they can be. On the discretionary funding, that is of course a partnership with local authorities, and as members in here are always quick to remind me, when we do things in partnership, there is a role for local government to come to a point of agreement, and COSLA have been agreeing the distribution internally, and we have been agreeing with them the guidance. Now that guidance, as I'm sure everybody would accept, needs to strike a balance between clarity to make sure that we support sectors that we've already mentioned, like taxi drivers, but also discretion, reflecting the fact that businesses, perhaps in the Western Isles, will have different needs to those in the middle of Edinburgh. On Willie Rennie's other point, I hope that we can announce additional sectoral support for some of the businesses that he mentioned, including and particularly travel agents. And there's work going on specifically with the travel agents to ensure that we capture all of them. Now, Maurice Golden said that business support doesn't go far enough. Now, I agree. If there's one thing that we all agree with in this chamber, is that the need far outstrips the funds available. But let's be realistic. The funding here in Scotland has gone further than the UK policies that generated the consequentials. Now, I'm not content with just being slightly better than England. We need to make sure that we tailor our support to the businesses that needed it. Now, some members talked about long-term recovery, and whilst our primary focus is very much on the immediate response to the economic crisis and businesses in distress, there is a question there about long-term recovery, the future of town centres, retraining, reskilling. Jamie Halkford-Johnson said we need to look beyond the next month. I agree with that. And that's why I would make a plea on behalf of the budget situation. The future is uncertain. We must use our funding to help businesses now, but also to ensure in the middle of February there is funding to ensure that businesses can still get the recurring grants. Yes, I will.
Jamie Green. But I'll say Cabinet Secretary, she has about 10 seconds left.
Oh.
Jamie Green.
I'll be quick then. How much extra money has COVID cost the Scottish Government, and where did the money come from?
Kate Forbes.
As we've set out, the vast majority came from the UK Government in the form of consequentials, with an element of reprioritisation, and the details of that reprioritisation are in the budget revisions that are regularly published. The future is uncertain, so as I come to a close, Presiding Officer, we will continue to work with business organisations. This morning I met with the FSB. I'm always happy to speak to any member in this chamber on behalf of businesses in their constituency in order to ensure that we provide as much support as possible to get through these extremely challenging times.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. And I call on Jackie Bailey to wind up and to conclude our debate.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Let me get right to the nub of the debate. The Scottish Government has received £8.2 billion in Barnett consequentials from the start of the pandemic, and according to SPICE, who are of course independent of both government and indeed any political party, £2.2 billion remains to be formally allocated. Now let's take the Cabinet Secretary at face value. By my reckoning, more than half of that figure is currently unallocated and unspent, whilst businesses are going to the wall and jobs are being lost. There doesn't appear to be any sense of urgency on the part of the government to get the money out to where it can make the most difference. Let me repeat, businesses are going to the wall now. Jobs are being lost now, not next month, not next year, but now. Small Business Saturday, as others have said, is this Saturday coming. An initiative encouraged by Labour in government and embraced by us all. An opportunity to support local small businesses in our communities, not just now, but all year round. So let me, in the spirit of consensus, also commend the Scotland's Love Local campaign, because every and all efforts to protect our high streets and small businesses are to be welcomed. But there is no shopping in my area this Saturday, no going out to restaurants, no looking for Christmas presents at my local shops, no retail on offer other than supermarkets and takeaways. My high street is a ghost town, as is the case for the 11 local authority areas in Tier 4 of the framework. In other words, in lockdown. I recognise there is a public health crisis, but we need to minimise the economic crisis, which is already having a huge impact on jobs and livelihoods. That means the support in place now and during the next few months sustains businesses until the vaccine is in play and restrictions are properly lifted. Now, I made these points in the debate a few weeks ago, and I make no apology for repeating them. The Hotel Support Fund, as one example, had £14 million in it. It was oversubscribed. Only 30% of applicants got an award. These are small, family-run hotels, some of them in my area, that have received no support at all and are on the brink of closing. Many have furloughed staff, but some have had to lay off staff completely. Many of them are struggling now to stay afloat and don't see a future despite the vaccine. Then there was the Coronavirus Restriction Fund and the Hardship Fund, some £48 million allocated between the two. But how much has been spent? Now, in my area, I seem to deal with more and more companies that have been rejected. Some weren't eligible because the criteria were too tight. Hotels were rejected. Small businesses in the local supply chain were rejected. Those without business bank accounts were rejected. B&Bs were rejected, and the list goes on. And despite asking questions, we have still not been told how much was spent and how much was left over. And the fund closed on the 3rd of November, 4 weeks ago, so there should be no excuse for not providing that information. But let me give you a couple of examples. Small business that supplies local hotels and restaurants with hygiene supplies. They didn't get a grant. They were told that they weren't eligible for hardship funds because they didn't trade in perishable goods. Then there is the local craft brewer that will need to get rid of their cask ales because the pubs have been shut. Their product is perishable, but clearly not perishable enough, as they didn't get any help. They're going to have to throw their beer away. Now, I know many of my colleagues will regard that as a criminal action, but this is their living. And now we have the Strategic Framework Business Fund, but the criteria haven't substantially changed. So how many businesses will be eligible to apply? How many have already applied and been rejected? And how much has been set aside? Because I've asked the Scottish Government time after time, but there is no figure provided. Grants in these categories are also paid 4 weeks in arrears when the need is immediate. And what about the discretionary fund? £30 million for supply chain companies and people like taxi drivers, incredibly welcome, but the fund is not yet open and there seems to be no date in sight. Presiding officer, there are more than 350,000 small businesses in Scotland, employing 1.2 million people. They account for 99.3% of all private sector businesses. But they need our help. They don't need it next month or next year. They need it now. And let me finish where I started, presiding officer. The Scottish Government does have £2.2 billion that hasn't been formally allocated. More than half of that is not spent whilst businesses are going to the wall. They need to get the money out.
Thank you. And that concludes our debate on business support.